welcome everyone to this version of Your Freedom Hub's Accelerating Financial Freedom. I'm your host, Jeff Cantor, along with my co-host, Matt Nye. We'd certainly like you to register for future webinars if you aren't already, and also be aware we are being sponsored by Your Freedom Hub. Now, we also are recording all of these, and the episodes are fantastic. So these are all the links in the various networks that we show on, and they are case sensitive, so you're going to want to make sure you jot those down correctly. And to show you for a quick minute, this is kind of what these sites look like and some of the various videos that are up there already, and we keep building on these. We have other shows where we've got literally dozens of videos, and then of course we do have our sponsor here where you'll find out more about the things we're going to talk about tonight, as well as some other opportunities as well. But putting that aside, let's kind of get into what's going to happen with us tonight, and we're going to actually have a lot of fun by talking with Heather Wagenhals. And just for those that are unaware, she's a biology-based personal finance authority, so that sounds pretty compelling, right? She's definitely a best-selling author, speaker, and also a hostess on a lot of great little television segments of her own right, so you're going to be keen to see what she's got going on. Now, she also has some sites, and we're going to kind of drill through some of these tonight, both your unlockyourwealth.com and unlockyourwealthtoday.com. So, Heather, without ado, please take the floor.
Well, thank you so much for having me back again. I'm really excited to be filling in for my dear friend Matt while he's out on the campaign trail kicking butts. And we've got so much to deal with when it comes to life and achieving financial freedom, creating prosperity for ourselves and our family members and loved ones. And then we're hit with this pandemic, and whatever was going on in our lives, good, bad, or indifferent, we now have just put a magnifying glass on it and 100x'd everything. As you and I were talking through the break before the show started, we were talking about how stress impacts people relationship-wise. We were talking, and you were sharing, we were talking about divorce, which is another catastrophic event like a pandemic. I mean, it materially alters your life. And that kind of pressure, when the money and the finances aren't managed properly, that divorce seems to be the only viable solution unless folks can get on the same page financially. And there's some really good reasons why we don't. And a lot of people expect us to be rational, reasonable human beings with our critical thinking skills that we all have. And that's the expectation. And I remember when I was doing a workshop, and I always ask my audience after, I said, share one thing that you didn't know before today that nobody else has addressed. So if you're the first person, you get your pick of the litter. But when you're at the end, you really got to work to think of something. But it forces people to remember things. And this one woman said, oh my gosh, thank you so much for explaining the brain and behavior, how you did. And I'll do that for your folks tonight. And the reason why that's so important is because we are expected to be rational, critical thinking, reasonable creatures. However, that's not how our brain is set up. And as a result of the way our brain is structured, we are actually emotional creatures that use reason and logic after the fact to justify whatever questionable behavior or action we just took. And in the financial world, that's maybe buying a set of golf clubs you didn't tell your wife about, or splurging on that gown and you forgot to ask, your husband, is this part of our discretionary income spending this month? So, it causes a bunch of different challenges, but there's specific techniques that we can do to be able to weather any storm, but we have to address certain areas. And I do this in my Keys to Riches financial philosophy. And so I want to talk about these 3 keys that are really, really powerful that will help you, whether it's dealing with a pandemic or dealing with other people or just dealing with managing your money and achieving overall financial freedom. And that's that we have to become the master of our minds. And we have to be able to deal with, these 3 guys I call up there, the 3 amigos that kind of run the show. And it's our CERT method for information processing. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But the Keys to Riches is a financial philosophy I created that teaches you how to think like the rich and be in control of your own money. It also gives you specific techniques to create or fix your credit, eliminate debt, save, and invest, all while transforming your current financial habits into healthy money management skills. And on my Unlock Your Wealth Today TV show, we do that every week. And we take a new key and we address a new key and we teach you how to implement it. I also do some Instagram lives. You can find me at instagram.com/unlock your wealth. And on Wednesdays, I do live Instagrams, and it's always featuring the key. And then we explain what the key is and how to implement it in our lives. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about that's kind of prescient is this coronavirus, because it's exacerbating our financial challenges that we have already. Wouldn't you agree?
Exactly. It's and just like you said, it's a great magnifier, because really, like you said, divorce, I mean, that's like your personal pandemic.
Mhm.
But this being like kind of a national thing where everybody's suddenly focusing on their navel, it's a perfect time to do that. So you're right.
Right. So let me ask you this question. So does your significant other do things financially that irritate you? Like, can you pick one thing that you, maybe in the past, maybe your current significant other is so fabulous that they don't have any flaws, but maybe you had a past significant other do something that really irritated you when it came to money?
Well, there would always be that situation where they would spend money real frivolously on a regular basis just for some indulgence, when we really shouldn't, based on having just either too much money to tie up to a car note or somewhere we should be better applying that money. But, their instincts or their desire would get ahead of their rationale. And of course, that would suddenly create a little friction.
Right, because we buy on emotion and use reason and logic after the fact to justify our behaviors. But the challenge that we have isn't that we don't know right from wrong, that we don't know to spend less and save more. People are like, what's the secret to getting rich? And I always say, spend less, save and invest more. And they're like, it can't be that simple. But it is. We want it to be super complex, right? So, and the secret desire there that drives that need for it to be super complex is so when we screw up, as we inevitably do, then we have something to blame it on. Well, it was just too difficult to figure that out. I can't figure out the stock market. I'll never be an investor. Well, not with that attitude, you won't. It's not that difficult. You just have to apply yourself. But that starts dealing with how we process information. We've got this battle of the wills that goes on inside of our head with these people, that live in parts of our brain that are supposed to be doing a certain thing one way. And but then they make a left turn, and we don't know why, or we think it's, like you said, about indulging or being frivolous or passing time. But there are actually other stronger, potentially motivational behaviors that are driving those ineffective choices. And that's, where I came up with my CERT method for information processing. And it's to help us understand how we make decisions and what drives those decisions. And by understanding that better, when we do make ineffective decisions or about to make an ineffective decision, we'll identify it faster, and then we can redirect that action into something that's more beneficial. We can go out and blow all the cash that we have, and then we have none. Or we can invest the cash that we have and live off of the revenue it generates, the interest or profit, depending on what type of investment that you're doing. But we can't get there if we keep self-sabotaging, if we have this behavior from our patterning that happened from parents, peers, and people of influence growing up. We're never going to get around that to start making effective decisions. And one of the things that will help us make effective decisions, again, is understanding the CERT method for information processing. And it simply is an acronym, and it stands for survive, emote, reason, survive, emote, and remember, and then think critically. And so when we move through this, two of those things are driving us to make ineffective choices. And it's the first two sections of our brain that we really think with. And that's the survive and emote remember. So when we think about this, I like to describe the evolution of the brain as a 3-story house that was built without zoning permits. So the first part of the house that's built, the first floor, is our foundation brain. We can think of this as our reptilian brain or our survival brain. In this part of the house, there lives what I call our oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought. I'm looking at the guy. But he is our initial decision officer. And the acronym, if you think about it, is I do. And the reason why that's so important is because he makes decisions about you and your next action in fractions of a second. And he does this all like under the radar. You really don't really have a conscious knowledge of what's going on because it's instinctive and it's reactionary. So something comes into your environment, whether it's this external environment that you can see, feel, and touch, or maybe it's an internal environment where you're generating a particular thought about something. And so as this initial decision officer has to take, and he has to make a snap decision, and he's only going to make a decision about threat to life. So he's just about threat assessment. And if something feels threatening to him, whether or not in reality it is, then he's going to make a decision. He's going to go to his file cabinet, or he's going to look on his computer for what files there are. And then he's going to say, okay, this is the stimulus. I've got a pre-programmed response. And it could be a genetic response to survive, or it could be part of our evolutionary decisions. And it could be one that is generated from a behavior that we acquired as a child, something we learned from our parents or our peers or other people of influence. You know, I think about some of the things that my teachers did that had significant impact on me when I was small, that are habits that help me be prosperous today. So we've got to process information on this first level, and we do this with our initial decision officer. Then, if the stimulus comes into the brain and can move up, like he's not threatened, and he's driven towards pleasure and away from pain, because it's not just about avoiding, you know, death or injury, but it's also about seeking pleasure. Now, a nonviolent state can be considered pleasurable even if you're not participating in a pleasurable activity. But pleasurable activities have their pitfalls as well, because this is where we can get into all sorts of addictions if we get carried away and we don't meter that with discipline and pre-programmed behaviors that are supporting our success versus, you know, growing up with an alcoholic. Well, there's an example. Every time something goes wrong, you reach for a bottle. That's programming, whether we want to believe it or not. And you can go one of two ways. If your parents were happy drunks and you didn't think much of it, well, then, you know, you might be able to become a significant drinker if it was something that was approved of. And if you don't create discipline and structure in your life, well, it can get out of hand. And any addiction can do that. Any extreme amount of pleasure that you don't regulate properly can become that. So it can be deleterious either way, because when things happen, when our survival mode kicks in and we're trying to avoid pain, that pain might just be the pain of something that's going to help you grow, like not trying something for the fear of not being good at it, right? Or not being good enough. That's a big problem, you know, because sometimes the very things that can make or break the difference that we're looking for in our lives is the thing that we're avoiding because we're fearful that we might not be good enough. Well, let me just tell you, anybody that's ever done something from the very beginning sucked at it. Michael Jordan missed more baskets than he ever made, and he was still considered the greatest of all time in basketball. So when we look at examples like that, it's pretty easy to see how we have to not only meet these fears, but overcome them. You don't have to eliminate them. You just have to be able to move past them, recognize that they're there, and move forward anyway. That's what courage is. So we have to get past this initial decision officer. We get to the second floor. We take the elevator. We go up to the second floor. This is emotion and remember. I like to call this guy our crazy curmudgeon because, again, he's trying to keep us safe. But now we have conscious memories that we're dealing with. If we had a bad experience at summer camp as a kid, that's going to stick with you forever, you know? And so when you maybe a large group of kids came up and hung you from a tree by your underpants, right? And so as a knee-jerk reaction, anytime there's more than 4 people in a group coming towards you, you get scared. I mean, it's that simple. Even though the 4 guys were innocuous to begin with, the initial decision officer might have said, oh, this isn't a threat. There's just like 4 guys walking down the street. They're not carrying weapons or anything. But you remember the one time that it didn't matter how much or how little weapons they had because it still hurt to get hung in the tree by your skivvies. And then, so finally, if we can not have an unpleasant memory or a too pleasurable one, and we can look at things and not have our emotions get in the way of the decision, then, and only then can we take the elevator up to the 3rd floor where I say Logic Larry lives. And this is where all of our critical thinking skills happen. And in this area of the brain, this is where we can reason and evaluate. Now, here's the challenge. We're making reasoned and evaluative decisions based on the colors that the first 2 may have provided, you know? So again, you might make it to that top level and be able to think critically, but it may not be on the actual facts, the objective information. It might be on your take of that, which is very easy for the brain to do because we filter and sort information. We all have to do it because so much is coming in. While I'm sitting here talking to you, you've got so many other things going on. Like you may not know where the position of your feet are right now. And now that I brought it up, maybe you're like, okay, yeah, I do notice. I do have my feet crossed, or, oh, my legs are crossed, or I didn't realize I had my foot cocked in such a way that my ankle was giving me grief. All that information is coming in. Plus, you also have all the information coming in from your heart rate, your breathing. Your brain is regulating 8 bazillion things at the same time. And you're supposed to be able to think critically. So it filters stuff out, and it filters what's relevant to you or what you're comfortable or familiar with. You know, and it's like this bias that we have. And so even if something might be different, if it starts out feeling the same, we kind of make and we kind of make a dismissive judgment about it because we're remembering something, we're not actually thinking critically. But where this goes sideways is when we have to make a decision, but we've got the first 2 guys, you know, the initial decision officer driving the bus, or our emotions and the crazy curmudgeon driving the bus. And in either case, you know, these 2 guys by themselves, they're going to get you into some trouble. They're going to do their best to avoid trouble, but by avoiding trouble, like getting up and going to work, even though you're tired, even though you partied last night, blew all your money, or, you know, got wasted, whatever it is, you know, by caring for yourself, say, oh, you should just stay in bed a little longer, hit that snooze bar, or, oh, I'm not going in today, jeopardizes other areas of your life if you just go by emotions or if you just go by your instinct. So we really need to have that complete package, you know, and that's what's important, is to learn how we think, because when we understand how we think, we can make more effective decisions. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, there's no question about that.
Yeah. So think of where you are financially, and think of it as in I'm okay, I'm doing stellar, or not so good. Just think of 3 different categories and think about this. And so, you know, think about what you do most often. And many times, you know, our brains are on autopilot, you know, because we've done something so many times, you know, we don't think about it, but we go to Starbucks every day, and every day we get their little muffin sandwich, or we get that, you know, triple dip with the 3rd thing and the half calf, not decaf. And, you know, all these crazy things for our customized order. And we do this automatically, but why are we even at Starbucks? I mean, are we going there because we're chit-chatting with our friends? You know, I had a little health issue for a while. I had to give up caffeine. But I still found myself turning into, at this place, it was called Seattle Espresso, and I was going there all the time. And I really wasn't going there for coffee, but I was wasting money there, you know, because I was going there for the social aspect. I could have went there and ordered something cheaper. I could have went there and got a bottle of water and still hung out with the same people, because those people that were important to me that made me want to go there every day for that Cheers version, like that, you know, the TV show Cheers, like that version of comfortableness, you know, a place you can go where everybody knows your name. And that's why I was going there. I wasn't going there for any other thing, but just to see my friends and be able to hang out for a minute. But in the process, I was wasting money. I'm like, so how can I preserve this? It wasn't about eliminating the coffee behavior, because we know that doesn't work long-term. But what does work is modifying our existing behavior. And instead of making a radical change, everybody is all for these, like, oh, you know, you need to radically change. You know, you need to start getting up like an hour earlier every day if you want to lose weight and go work out. Well, that should be your ideal goal, but the brain's going to fight you on that because it's not comfortable. You're resetting sleep patterns. You're doing all sorts of stuff. So the likelihood of you succeeding is pretty slim. And so what we want to do is what, you know, I call this little scooch factor. And what we want to do is move our way into what's good for us by not triggering these other systems, you know, whether it's our survival mode because we feel threatened, or our emotional remembering mode where, oh, that was unpleasant, or I didn't like that, you know. And so we want to make sure that we're not tripping that system up. And the only way to do is to kind of fly under the radar. You know, so what's 5 minutes here or there? It's nothing. If you set your alarm for 5 minutes earlier, you want to get up an hour earlier, I'm going to show you how to do it in 14 days. And you're going to do it 5 minutes at a time. That's it. 5 minutes at a time. And you're going to move yourself systematically back 5 minutes each day. And you go 5 minutes today and then another 5 tomorrow. And before you know it, in 14 days, you'll have that hour. And it won't be as deleterious to you physiologically as it would be to go cold turkey. And plus, again, once our homeostasis gets knocked off, which is the natural drive for order and balance in our system, then, you know, once that gets knocked off, you know, the body's going to work really hard to reset it. And if you take and you try to go for an hour right out of the gate, you might get up the first day, but you ain't getting up the second day. The third day, out of the question. Not going to happen. So the question becomes, I need to understand my behavior. So how do I do that? Well, that's using the CERT method for information processing. And then we have to have like a structured plan, you know, to be able to create financial freedom in our lives, especially if we're experiencing a lot of financial chaos amidst the pandemic. And so that's what we have to do, is we have to figure out, how can I be resourceful enough and modify what I'm doing in a short enough time frame that it becomes valuable to me, that I'll be willing to work at it, but it doesn't nudge or scooch over our initial decision officer or our crazy curmudgeon too much. Because we want to be able to be at our highest resource state, which means using and hanging out with Logic Larry where everybody's getting along. But when we make mistakes, when we have an emotional reaction, when we have a knee-jerk reaction, those types of responses, like pull the emergency stop on the elevator so you can't go upstairs. Because what happens when that emergency stop is pulled is your body starts dumping a ton of hormone, and it drives the blood flow away from the cavity to the extremities so you can what? Fight, freeze, or flee. And so that's what you got to be working for, is understanding, how do I make these changes in my life? How do I achieve financial freedom? And then, you know, the last part is, what tools can help us get there? What tools can we use today that can help us create financial freedom? And the keys to riches is part of it, understanding what we need to do and how we need to take these steps. And the keys that I would like to talk about is our fourth key: knowledge is power, not knowing is powerful. It's very, very difficult for us to understand what we need to accomplish financially if we don't understand money. if we don't understand behavior, we're never going to be successful at it. So what we have to do instead is kind of rewind and figure out, okay, we need to go to the beginning and say, all right, what is it that I don't know that I need to know in order to achieve financial freedom? And this is the key where I created my 3-5 financial strategy. There's 3 questions you ask yourself and 5 areas of concern. And so the 3 questions are simply, where am I? Where am I going? And what's the difference? Now, once we understand those 3 or ask those 3 questions, we can address these 5 areas of concern. And the first is income, expenses, and credit. We have to focus on spending less and saving and investing more. And the only way for us to do that is we have to take and figure out where we are. The next thing is, once we understand where we are and we're on the road to financial freedom, we need to, as I say, insure ourselves to insure ourselves financially. And this is about creating protections. And that's this second area of concern we have to address. Now that we've identified and addressed what our finances are, we've created a healthy savings and spending plan. And this is something that I do one-on-one as well as in my group workshops. And if you want to find out more about that, you're at the webpage right now, unlockyourwealth.com is where you can find that out. But simply, what we need to do is start creating money and momentum. And so the first layer or tier of savings is going to be asset accumulation. And this is just the mere savings of money that you're earning. And it can be you actively earning it by your blood, sweat, and tears at a real job, or it could be you passively earning it through investments. But in any case, we have to dial that part in. Then once we have something to invest, now that we've been able to accumulate things, we can now do asset multiplication. And this is where we start investing our money and putting it to work for us. And there's a myriad ways that we can do that. Working is only one of them. And then finally, once we have generated all this incredible wealth, well, now we want to be able to keep as much of that as we can. So in the final key is asset preservation. And these are tax mitigation strategies, so we can reduce or eliminate what we're going to be having to pay out. I am not a big proponent of taxes at all. And so we want to do what we can to mitigate that and create our legacy by defining our charitable giving plans, by creating a power of attorney for your health directives. This could be your estate planning. Maybe there's children that you don't want to receive your hard-earned wealth. Maybe they've made mistakes in the past, or maybe you're just trying to figure things out and where you need to be and what space you need to be in, and just creating a will because you have financial obligations that need to be taken care of, or people you're financially responsible for that you don't want to have harmed in the process just because you passed away. And so by knowing what it is that we need to know, this fourth key allows us to make more effective decisions because we're able to address them and seek out the knowledge in these areas that we need that we're weak in. And that's the best way to go, is to be able to apply this 3-5 financial strategy. Now, there's 2 other things that I want to talk about, with regard to this, and these are the couple other keys that are affected. Now, take emotion out of the picture. How do you feel about drinking water? Are you a water drinker? I have water right here. Are you a drinker?
Love that water.
Well, so what we don't realize is how powerful water is. We are electrochemical beings, okay? Making synaptic responses all over the place in our head, sending electrical impulses so I can pick up my hand and wave to you, throw you a little peace symbol, do like an elbow bump now that we're being socially distant from people. We're not shaking hands anymore. I got my utility guy came today, and he's like, well, it was a pleasure to meet you. And then he did the little elbow bump thing. And I'm like, what? And I was like, well, we're social distancing at my company. And I'm like, okay, that's a new one on me, but so let's social distance. And so, But I digress. What we have to do is utilize this power, this knowledge that we have. And anytime you get caught in a bind, you're going to make an ineffective spending decision. Maybe you are trying to think twice about something, or maybe your emotions are getting the best of you and you're not in your highest resource state, but you need to start making effective decisions in this moment. Your boss is breathing down your neck to get this report that was due yesterday, this sort of thing, right? How do we change our electrical chemical conductivity? One thing we can do is we can inhale deeply and belly breathe. And I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but that would just be a nice slow inhale through the nose to filter the air. But you can only do that so many times because then you start to get lightheaded. But 1 or 2 deep belly breaths is great. But something that's even faster, and this was what was so fascinating to me when I was doing all of this brain research with this incredible guy here at the Southwest Center for Attention Deficit Disorder. And what was so crazy is, like, so I was doing these mind games that he was having me play on the computer, and they weren't really playing a game, but it was kind of in a game-like format. And I was getting so tired, and it was like dragging, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't concentrate. Like, my ship kept crashing because I was playing like a video game without a joystick. My brain was the joystick hooked up to all these wires. And it's really crazy how focus and stuff works. But I was getting so tired. And he said, just take a drink of water. And I said, what's that going to do? And he goes, it's going to raise your electrochemical conductivity. And sure enough, I took a couple of deep swallows, and then before you know it, woo, my plane was flying right. My boats were sailing where they were supposed to sail. And it was a crazy thing. In fractions of a second, you can change the way you think by simply having some water to drink. And I just made a rhyme there. I didn't mean to do that. That's pretty funny. But that's something simple that we can do. And I know it sounds remedial. They're like, well, how is that going to solve my problems? It's not going to solve your problems, but it's going to put you in your highest resource state to do that very thing. So you can make an effective decision because your emotions won't be getting the best of you. Your survival instincts won't be getting the best of you. You know, and half of the reasons why we don't do things or get ourselves into the debt is because we're fighting our fears. And there's some basic fears. You know, the fear of failure is there. But there's, you know, the fear of abandonment, not being good enough, being controlled, you know, losing control. These are all things that drive us. But the number one fear, you would think death would be the number one fear, but it's the lowest on the chart of fears. The highest fear on the fears chart is the fear of ego death, which is what? Embarrassment. We're more afraid about being embarrassed because maybe we don't have that designer watch or those luxury shoes or handbags. And so we're concerned that we're going to be inappropriately judged or inaccurately judged. And we want people to think the best of us. That's just a natural drive. And so we go out and blow a bunch of cash. And in order for you to achieve financial freedom, you've got to do a couple of things really well. Spend less and save and invest more. And every wealthy person does that. Every entrepreneur has some crazy story about how they were able to forsake money, finances, relationships, whatever that they gave up in pursuit of their goals and achievements that got them to where they are. And it, you know, you can only split a dollar so many ways, right? And so, you know, instead of trying to worry about how do I save when I'm splitting, it's like, well, how do I create more money? And one of the things that you need to do that you and I have talked about on the last episode is we have to eliminate frivolous debt. We must eliminate frivolous debt because we're not going to have anything to invest. And when we do that, I mean, did you ever watch Popeye as a kid, the cartoon Popeye?
I am what I am.
I'm Popeye the Sailor Man. So, you know, I think about Popeye, right? And I think about I am what I am. And what's crazy is that, you know, he had this character. Do you remember the character on the show named Wimpy?
I'll pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today.
Exactly. So what happens when we use our credit card is we pay for the burger today, but then we go back the following week when we pay interest and we're paying more money for the same burger. Does that make sense? Would you
Not
do
very
that?
much. Not to anybody that starts to think about it when you put it in such a simplistic way, yet they're doing it all the time.
Right. I mean, I love it. I love when people say, oh yeah, I paid $300,000 for my house. No, you didn't, because if you add up all the payments that you've paid, it's going to total way more than 300,000. But we don't think about that. When we come to the closing table after we sold our house, we wonder why we haven't profited, because we haven't managed our money properly, because we didn't do what we needed to do in this transaction to make it make sense. You know, and so people make simple mistakes all the time, and they're I wouldn't say totally innocuous, but they're certainly under the radar as far as us paying attention to it. But so one of the things we can do is, you know, we can create a way to eliminate debt. Another thing to do is make more effective decisions with our health and our choices, because again, highest resource state has to do with health and wellness. And on my show, Unlock Your Wealth today, it's about wealth, health, wisdom, and more pleasurable pursuits. And so they have to you have to generate wealth, you have to maintain your health, you have to increase your knowledge and level of wisdom, and then you can go out and have more fun. And it's got to be done in that order. And so one of the ways to do that is save money. And so this is what I want you to explain, because I've gotten a little bit of this explanation, but one of the biggest expenses that we have as individuals is healthcare. Wouldn't you agree?
It's huge. I mean, in certain people's lives, it's surpassed the cost of their mortgage.
Oh yeah. I mean, for sure. Like open heart surgery, 80 grand. Start peeling those dollars off. So one way that we can do it is we can do cost sharing plans. And another way is to visit a marketplace for that. And you have a really incredible marketplace that I think is really growing, and a really unique app to be able to do that, to negotiate the best deal. I mean, we negotiate for our cars, right? We negotiate for our homes. Why shouldn't we be able to negotiate for our healthcare?
I think it's a natural function in just about everything that you can do in America. You know, I am going to buy this refrigerator and this dryer. Hey, I want a deal because I'm getting two items here. I want to get a little package deal. But in healthcare,
Right.
no one even asks what anything costs. It's just like, well, what's my copay on that?
Right. And that's just what costs you. And I was fun. It's like one of my friends and I are on the same chronic medication together. And he was saying, well, it's only $30. And I'm like, for you, it's only $30. It's $150 for me. And he's like, wow, I didn't know. And I'm all, yeah, now you do. Now you know. And if you knew about those types of things ahead of time, wouldn't it be great if you could go into a marketplace and negotiate that sort of stuff, you know, and be able to pay people what they're worth? You bypass a lot of this stuff.
Well, yeah, a lot of stuff is so loaded up with added costs that has nothing to do with the reality of it. You know, I always tell everybody it's like buying magazines at the airport. I mean, you know, the prices are absurd because where else are you going to go? And then whatever they charge rent or what have you. But it's not, you know, if you had choices, you probably wouldn't have bought that magazine at that particular newsstand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, so one of my quarterly guest hosts, and he's also the #3 stock picker in the world, was his name is Jim Woods, and you can find him at jimwoodsinvesting.com. He was on TD Ameritrade the other day, and he was talking about the best stocks to weather this crisis and this coronavirus. And they were talking about not just these stocks, but they were talking about why these companies can weather this, whatever happens to us, locking down in these countries and doing all of these crazy things. And so the FANG stocks stand for Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. And that's so where they came up with the acronym of the FANG stocks. And the one common denominator that all of these have in common is they're super flush with cash. They have money in the bank. They don't have to leverage themselves. They don't have to run for emergency grants from the government to help their business survive during this downturn. They can weather the storm perfectly by themselves because of their huge cash position. You can't have a huge cash position if you're carrying a lot of debt. And what do we know when we have money is we have choice. I like to think of dollars not as dollars because people tie up too many emotions in a dollar bill. You know, things from their childhood, things from growing up. Money is very, very emotional. But if we think about it as units of choice, the more units of choice we generate, the more units of choice we have. And think about this, when you can go into a healthcare system and be able to negotiate, like in a healthcare marketplace, be able to negotiate for services and save tons of money because you're not spending money on insurance. Or if you do something smart, like one of those health or cost sharing plans. I mean, think about the power that gives you to be able to have control over your health and well-being. I mean, what's that worth? And it's less expensive.
Priceless.
It's less expensive than regular insurance.
Yep.
You know, so why wouldn't you want something like that? And that's how we create that huge amount of wealth, is we have to be able to take a cash position. And we can't do that if we're mired in debt. So we got to get rid of the debt, and we have to make more effective decisions. And one of our biggest areas of personal debt that we get into is healthcare.
You know, it's a big problem, and boy, you know, we could keep going all night, but we're running out of time here already today. You know, I would tell you, I'll tell you what I like and what I dislike about what you said. What I like about what you said is that you took the reality, because the typical thought process is whether you're either going to fight or flee, but you added the choice that everybody really makes, which is to freeze. Right. So freezing actually is a choice. A lot of people think if I flee or fight, that's like but most people think, well, yeah, if I fought or if I fled, well, that's a decision. So I think I'll just do nothing. Hello, that's a decision right there. And usually that's a fatal one for sure. If either option was a choice that you should have made, freezing is like the worst, because you're going to get killed either which way is bad. But so that's what I like. What I don't like is the fact that everybody suddenly has to go, oh my gosh, I actually have to pay attention to what I'm doing. I thought there was like a pill I could take, or a button I could push, or a person I could hire, or isn't there an app for that? Can I buy it on Prime? I mean, anything. Exactly. But that I have to do something? Oh my gosh, I have to do something. This is the worst news ever. It's a shame, but it's true, because like you said.
You know how to get to be an effective decision maker? Start making decisions and then go back and evaluate. That was a good one. I'll do that again. That was a not so good one. I'm going to stop doing that and find another
behavior. But we're keen to do that with picking cell phones out. But when it comes to taking care of yourself, everybody just wants to, abrogate doing anything. It's just too much work. Suddenly, they're not fun.
I know. We spend more time planning our 2-week vacation than the other 50 weeks of work and achievement opportunities instead.
It's ridiculous. Well, listen, I really appreciate being here with us today. This was really a fantastic time well spent. And, in this video, when we release it, we'll make sure that all the information is in the credits so people can definitely follow up accordingly. And we'll definitely have to do this again.
Oh, I love it. I enjoy chatting with you. I have a lot of fun. Thanks for having me again, Jeff.